morning. Welcome to The Morning Touch. I'm Darwin Campbell. The Morning Touch is brought to you by the FSBC in Glendale for your encouragement. If you like what we say, please subscribe to the channel. We'd love to have you be a part of our team. I want to talk to you from 1 Samuel chapter 9, verses 15 through 21. For the sake of emphasis and time, I'm only going to read the main verse that I'm interested in focusing on today, but you can go back and read for your own study purposes. It's about Saul becoming king of Israel, and Samuel being told by God that Saul was to be the anointed king. When Saul sought to fulfill the calling of God, he was kind of surprised that such could come to him. And that's where we'll start at verse 21. Saul responded, after meeting Samuel, of course, Saul responded, "Am I not a Benjaminite from the smallest of Israel's tribes? Isn't my clan the least important of the clans of the Benjaminite tribe? So why have you said something like this to me now?" Saul was stunned that he was going to be the next king of Israel, and he did not understand why. How, out of all of the thousands upon thousands of great leaders, great warriors, men rich with resources, that the Lord would reach down into the smallest and the least of the least to select Saul to be king? That's where we're going to focus on verse 21. The shock of Saul and the response of God. Indeed, we must note that God's ways are not our ways, and that God's thoughts are not our thoughts. None of us in our right mind would have thought that the least of the least in the clan of the Benjamites would become king. Saul didn't even think that. Samuel was probably even surprised by that. But God made his choice, and he said, "Samuel, you are the one from the least of the least, from the least of the clan of the least in the Benjaminite crew. I pick you." Indeed, God made a believer out of Saul and even Samuel. But this lends itself to this statement: God can take the least of the least. He can take the weakest of the weak. He can take the least powerful and make it great. That's what God does. Yahweh, Jehovah God, exerts his wisdom and his mighty effort on someone that you think, well, that's just not going to work out. But God shows us that he can take the smallest and the least and the weakest and make it powerful and make it great. He selected Saul king of Israel. And early Saul was obedient, he was humble, and he was coachable. And that's the thing about when God places us in a position of responsibility. We must remain humble. We must recognize that he is the one who made us great. We cannot turn our backs on our humility. And we must always remain coachable and teachable where God puts us. Indeed, many of us shortchange our blessings because we fail to understand the mind of God, because we fail to understand and we think the way Saul thought. How can you select me? Why am I the one? We all go through life shortchanging ourselves, thinking that I'm not good enough. I don't have enough money. I don't have the right last name. Who am I to stand up? Who am I to speak out? I just can't do it. These are the things that have been programmed into our DNA, and we repeat them to ourselves over and over and over again. And it takes someone like God to select someone like Saul to get our attention and let us know that God can use us no matter where we are or no matter where we come from. We are the ones who don't think properly or correctly. We must understand that God shows us in Saul's selection that, yeah, to us it may not make sense, but it gets our attention. To us, we see that it's illogical, but God makes it logical. To us, we see that things are impossible, but God makes it possible. To us, we may see ourselves as losers, but God sees us as winners. To us, we may seem like we're small, like Saul says, I'm small, I'm insignificant. We may say the same thing to ourselves, but God says, you're not only a winner, but you're significant. You may see yourself as powerless, but it is God who can make you powerful. These are the things and the characteristics and the traits that Saul had to learn to understand. That God is in control. And when God is in control, he makes the illogical logical. He makes the impossible possible. He makes the loser a winner. He makes the small large. He makes the insignificant significant. He makes the powerless powerful. Indeed, this is a great message to us today that we need to understand from this small Bible verse in 1 Samuel 9:21. The takeaway is this: stop thinking negative things. Stop limiting God. God is a lot larger than our parameter, than our thoughts. He's a lot larger than our own little world that we live in. And we need to understand we must never give up on him. He shows us he made Saul great. He can make you great the same way if you don't give up on yourself. No matter what comes your way, COVID-19, unemployment, health issues, financial problems, God is not too small to rescue you from that situation. God is not so insignificant that he can't step in and wipe all of that away. And we need to recognize and realize who God is and what he can do. He sees things that in you that you can't see. So you should never think or behave or believe that you're not viable. You are important to God. Let me say this. Your life matters to God. I know you're sitting there saying, well, nobody cares about me. Your life matters to God. And we must understand that we need to stop the negative thinking because your life matters to God. You are good enough. You can stand up. You can speak out. You can make a difference. God used Saul from the smallest tribe and the least of the clan within that tribe. He built him up. He selected him. He chose him. He made him great. He can do the same for you, no matter what your name is, no matter where you come from, no matter what your family background is, no matter how much money you make. God can make you great if you don't give up. No matter what you've done in your life, if you don't give up and you put your faith in your heart in God, it will make the difference in your life. Your life matters to God. And then thirdly, I'm going to close with this. God can use you wherever you are. You know, you may have ridden the train of addiction or alcoholism, or you may have been ridden the train of drugs, or you may have ridden the train of partying. You may have done a lot of things. And you might feel insignificant and small and like God doesn't care and that God can't use you and doesn't want you. Your life matters. Your soul matters. And you need to understand that God can use you wherever you are. He sent Jesus to die on the cross for our sins so that we can have salvation. You got to step forward in faith and trust in him. And you've got to walk in his way and walk in his light. Be coachable. Be trainable. Be able to be developed by him and his word. Be willing to be obedient. And God can do great things with you and your life. God can send a message to the smallest of the small that there is hope. No one has to collapse under the weight of hopelessness. God says, I selected Saul, I can select you. The Morning Touch is brought to you by the FSBC in Glendale for your encouragement. We hope you've been encouraged today.